Okay, so obviously I'm not Korean, and I don't pass myself off as an expert on Korea. I'm interested in Korea for a couple reasons. One, I teach AP World, so have to deal with Korea in world history. And two, since Cranbrook is a day and boarding school with international borders, we have a significant Korean population. These are students from Korea who attend our school, usually in order to have a better chance of getting into American universities. And so I feel it's important that I learn about Korea so that I can be an effective instructor for them. And I live on campus. I'm actually a boarding teacher. My home is in Wisconsin. And 2 weeks ago, I got back from vacation to find a flooded basement. I was visiting my father-in-law, and our sump pump broke, and it's been a disaster. And as a teacher slash hoarder, some of my stuff was ruined, and so it's been a tough couple weeks. So I've been dealing with that. I'm here really then as a cheerleader for the program that I attended. I attended the KAFE program in California. So has anybody else attended that program? All right, good. So you chime in whenever. How many years ago was it for you? Last summer. So please feel free to chime in anytime you want. And that goes for everybody. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to just show you basically what the program is. So maybe you'll think about attending, and I'll share some things that I thought were really interesting that I learned. It's an excellent program, and it's sponsored now by USC. That's why I have a USC shirt on. And the NOM Center is a partner in this program and encourages teachers from Michigan to attend. So probably the first thing you want to know is, what is it going to cost you? Basically, you have to pay a deposit of $350. That has to come from you. The rest is totally picked up by the center. It's co-sponsored by KAFE, which is the educational foundation and kind of think tank, and then USC is the official host. Your airfare is paid out to Los Angeles. You put in a very nice hotel. We stayed at the Line Hotel, which is a really new hotel in Koreatown, so you're right smack in Koreatown. Your meals are covered, and of course the Korean food is outstanding. It's a big part of the experience. You get materials, you hear excellent lectures, and I'll kind of go over some of the people that we heard from and maybe some nuggets of what they shared with us. And it's just an excellent experience. It's not just for K-12 teachers. This year there were several librarians, there were curriculum people, and there were some college professors. So they're all from all over the United States. So basically, the idea of the program is that you go spend a week in Los Angeles, you stay in Koreatown, you learn about Korea, and there are presentations or field trips. You go out and do things, and it's a lot of fun. And the only cost is that initial kind of deposit that you have to pay. Everything else is covered. What you also get is access to their files of materials. And as a teacher, the Dropbox that they have is excellent. I'll show you some of the stuff. And I Xeroxed off a few of the PowerPoints. We've been given permission to share. So if you see a PowerPoint up there that you'd like me to share with you, just write your email right on the front of the binder here, and then I'll be glad to forward it to you. Because I know teachers like to appropriate other people's stuff, and as long as you give credit, it's fine. So I'll pass these around. So what these are copies of some of the PowerPoints that I'll show you. So what I want to show you first is kind of their promotional little video that they put together, which will give you a good overview. This is their website. And then this is maybe you're in it. This is from last year, I believe. Do we need the sound plugged in or something? Okay. Well, you can at least see the picture. Did you guys do the drums? Yep.
Academy for Educators. KAFE's mission is to bring educators from all over the country to Los Angeles to learn about Korean history, culture, and the Korean American experience.
Can you guys hear or not?
During the week-long seminar, we cover everything from Korean history, culture, Korean immigration stories, art, music, food. We cover the whole gamut. So within 1 week, you get all things Korean. And I think by the time the teachers leave at the end of the seminar week, they are so enthused and energized and eager to go back to their school districts to teach what they have learned.
We do a wedding, Korean wedding.
My hope for KAFE is that our stories, our parents' and grandparents' stories, are not forgotten, but embedded into the history books in this country so that future generations may know what it took, the sacrifices, and the hope that it took to build our lives here in this country.
I'm Halmoni in Korea, respected, honored, an old lady in America, disputed and shunned. White hair hiding the wisdom of my years, quietly waiting.
KAFE would not be possible without all the fabulous educators who come through our doors to learn about our students and our families. We're also very fortunate to have the support of our sponsors, the Korean Cultural Center, Korea Foundation, and USC's Korean Studies Institute. 감사합니다.
Okay. So the two founders, kind of the modern founders, are Helly Lee, who is the woman that you just saw, and then the guy with the hat is Daniel Lee. So they are the two people who are in charge. It was actually my second time at the cafe. It just merged with USC recently, and so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go back. So one of the things that we talked about, and this is one of the things from the Dropbox, is, what is it doing? So how is Korea important? Why study Korea? I can tell you, teaching AP World, Korea gets maybe a few minutes in the entire year. And that's it. It's a shame, but part of that is the fact that Korea's been stable for so long, so you have stability. You just have a handful of dynasties. Korea hasn't invaded other people, so much of the story of world history is warfare. And so Korea has been invaded, but hasn't been an invader that frequently. Also, part of it is Korea gets overshadowed by China and Japan. And so one of the things that we talked about is that if you would put Korea a unified Korea in Europe would be a major power. It would rival Germany. So part of it is just geography, that because Korea is so overshadowed by China and India and Japan in terms of population, that Korea doesn't get the coverage that it should in world history courses, at least in the United States. So in modern times, in AP, we talk a little about the Japanese occupation of Korea, and we talk about the Korean War, and that's about it. So Korea doesn't get the attention it deserves, certainly in world history. So anyway, this is a PowerPoint that somebody put together talking about the 10 top reasons to talk about Korea. Well, one, as I just mentioned, Korea is not small. 72 million Koreans. When you unify the two, that's a significant population. Looking at the geography, again, you have Korea neighboring China and Japan, and these are supposed to be reasons why we should study Korea. You have quite a variety. Those of you who lived or been to Korea know that has very distinct seasons, as it talks about, and quite a varied terrain. Those of us who grew up with MASH, that was one of our first exposures to Korea, at least for me as a kid. I remember seeing the terrain when I was watching MASH. Another reason, of course, is the long history and the modernity. So Korea still very much values its history, values culture, but yet, as previously talked about, the economic miracle is simply incredible. So we talked, this is about the long, proud history of Korea, and again, stability. One of the professors that discussed this said, well, yes, Korea's been in a lot of wars, but when you compare Korean history to other civilizations, stability might be the adjective that you use most. Who else had, when you look at the length of time of these dynasties, I mean, the United States, a little over 200 years, look at the time, the stability and the length of these dynasties. When you think about it, compare it, say Chinese dynasties, Japanese dynasties, or so on, Korea is amazingly stable. And of course, you have the inventions, things like movable print, and so on. One of the things that we did learn about was Celadon, and Celadon as a commodity in world history. That's something that actually should be talked about more in AP. You have Buddhism, of course. Importance of nature. People talked about earlier how important Confucianism is in Korea, and often said that along with Singapore, perhaps maybe the most Confucian place in the world, where Korea is far more Confucian than China in many ways. Importance of family, filial piety, and obviously you certainly know Confucian traits, but the fact that it's still so important in Korea. Somebody was mentioning about model minorities. That's something that was talked about a lot in Los Angeles this summer. At the end, they had a panel with several people and educators. Of course, Los Angeles has a huge Korean population, and part of the discussion is how to deal with just excessive expectations for children, and how you can handle that, how you have to understand where the parents are coming from. I get that a lot at Cranbrook, and I had a student, Asian student who was a boarder, did very well, got into Washington, University of St. Louis. Parents were devastated. Wasn't good enough. No one in China knows Washington University, according to their parents. Doesn't have the name. It's not in the top whatever. The student was an excellent artist, decided to major in architecture at WashU. Again, parents were devastated, not going to be in STEM. An architect doesn't make enough money. An architect doesn't have enough prestige. It's not a good enough career. And this, as I talked to this young man as he came back from, he didn't even want to go home. He did not want to go home. He stayed the summer in St. Louis. And so, I mean, it's not just Asian students that have this type of pressure, but the model minority problem that you see that that students have to live up to. I have Korean students also, as you know, when they go home, what are they going to do? They're going to go to cram school in the summer. So some of my Korean students will cry. They don't want to go home because they know they're facing cram school. The other kids will say, oh, I'm going off hiking, I'm doing this. What are you doing this summer? Oh, I'm going to cram school all summer. And they cry. So it's definitely something that's very real. And the uniqueness. We have at Cranbrook a day called World Affairs seminar where we bring in speakers who talk about different topics, and then students put on demonstrations and give presentations. And a few years ago, we had a very interesting one. It was 5 Asian boys, and their presentation was called All Asians Are Not the Same. And they made up T-shirts, you know, all Asians are not the same. And then a Chinese student, a Japanese student, a student from Singapore, and a Korean student each gave lessons on the uniqueness of their cultures, showing that no, all Asians are not the same, and that each of their countries and cultures have unique traits. Something that everybody knows, but certainly needs to be reminded from time to time. Of course, the language, Buddhism. We had a couple discussions about North Korea. And the professor that gave that the talk, his name is Professor David Kang from USC. And his main point about North Korea, and it didn't necessarily go over, maybe you remember his, I think he's given it before. His speech, and he deals a lot with the media, is to break down the stereotypes that people have about North Korea. And the fact that he argues that no, the North Korean government is not insane. The North Korean government is not, quote, backward. His argument is that the North Korean government is very pragmatic and knows how to survive. And that was basically the point, that Korea, even though historically it hasn't invaded other people, that doesn't mean that Korea was isolated. Even aside from the Japanese occupations and the times when Korea was ruled by China, that Korea has been a very important part in international affairs, international trade, and so on, and that it of course, today it very much is. So the Korean War. In the U.S., and then comparing North and South Korea, the reasons for their development, and so on. Korea on the world stage today. K-pop, that's of course something that you can do a lot with your students. Korean film, which is cinema, which is becoming more and more important. We had a lecture on Korean cinema, and she showed us a lot of clips of South Korean soap operas and how popular they are in Japan and China. It was pretty amazing. She'd show us clips, and we're like, don't stop. We've got to know what happens here. It was so addictive. And so the Korean folks in the audience were like, yeah, I binged on that for 2 weeks straight. Didn't get any work done on my dissertation. So anyway, what this basically is argument for why Korea is important. And then that was the suggestion for the lesson plan that the presenter gave. So that was kind of the first day basically people talking about why Korea is important, why Korea deserves more attention in American curriculum, the long history of Korea, and so on. All right. And again, if you want me to send you these PowerPoints, just put your name on the binder because I can certainly share them. All right. Another one that was really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
One of the things that I thought was interesting when I was in Korea is I talked to a guy who was a Vietnam War veteran.
Uh-huh.
And Korea, the Republic of Korea, sent the second most soldiers to South Vietnam after the U.S. And not only did they send soldiers, a lot of them, 300,000, they sent some of their best, their Rangers, their SEAL Team 6. So, you would think that they would, because they still had the hot border with North Korea, they don't want to keep them home. But they were like, well, you helped us out in the Korean War, so we're going to help you out here, and we're going to send our best. And a lot of Americans don't know that, and it was, there really wasn't much discussion in Korea about what was and what. It's like, we're going.
Mm-hmm.
You helped us, we're helping you. So I thought that was another reason why.
Sure, sure. The military service, at least to the students at male students at Cranbrook, that's a very contentious issue. And what they'll complain is, well, you hear Confucianism is so patriarchal. It's so that males that traditionally, and it changed over time, very much so, but that at some points in Korean history, it was very male dominated. And the men got all the breaks and held the power and so on. Well, they complain that now that only boys have to go back and do military service, females don't. So that the girls get a head start on their higher education, on their careers, and the boys really complain. And a lot of them, not commenting one way or the other, but a lot of them would very much want to get out of that military service. Might be because they become Americanized, I don't know, but I find it really interesting that if you talk with the young guys, they'll say they think it's really unfair that only males have to do this service. Now, a lot could talk about there, but I'm just telling you what it is. All right, so one of the speakers, Professor Peterson from BYU, gave a talk about one way to talk about Korea, and I really, really like this as a way to possibly deal with some issues. So he talked about the yin and yang and that kind of thing, and then he said that one way that he thinks we could teach about Korea is to use these dualities of war and peace, male and female and so on. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you or really go over it, but he spent a large chunk of one of his lectures talking about this might be a good way to introduce Korea. And I agree. I think it could be. Any comments? Yeah.
Especially for high school level students.
Yep.
Korea, especially for the region, contains so many subjects that are important to the region. Korea is an excellent lens to, and this is a better way to focus that discussion. I teach in 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
When we study globalization, probably for the first time most likely is to address the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Korea is a perfect example because it's a pull in from so many other cultures, but it's so has a unique identity within the culture.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. Anyway, this is one of the best things that I took away from the week was this is a good organizing way, maybe perhaps, to talk about it. And then if you look at the PowerPoint in the binder, he goes on in great detail. As I mentioned, we had a speaker who talked about North Korea, Professor Kang from USC. And I want to show you just a little. I'm not going to sit here and read it to you, but I want to show you a little of his PowerPoint because it's got some interesting stuff, and you'll get the idea right away. One of the things he first said was, all right, the way the media portrays North Korea, people are shown as robots, as mindless, automatons, and that the people in North Korea are backward, they're brainwashed, and the government is a bunch of jackbooted thugs, is exactly the term that he used. And his point was that you have 24 million people in North Korea, right? These are human beings, these are not robots. And that basically was the framework for how he evaluated it. And then he went on to show different media images of how North Korea is portrayed in the media. And he was taking, fair to say, he took exception to the way that North Korea is portrayed. And so then he spent most of his talk talking about, for North Koreans, that's their normal life. Has anybody seen the documentary State of Mind? It's a really, really good documentary. I show parts of it every year. State of Mind, it's a little dated now. It's a few years old. But it's a documentary that some British journalists went into North Korea and were given access to 2 young gymnasts who participated in the mass games. The hundreds of thousands of people hold up cards and all those kinds of things. Well, these gymnasts were training basically the entire school year to perform. And one was fairly young, and one was maybe upper middle school, maybe, I don't know, maybe 8th grade. But it shows how hard they train. In their houses, in their apartments, it showed a radio that's on all the time, a propaganda that constantly, that they are not allowed to shut off. When the lights would go out, there was a part where one of the little girls says, "Oh, it's those damn Americans again." So she was blaming the fact that it was the Americans that were causing the electricity outages in North Korea. And then it shows you their performance, and it's done to music. It's really incredible. If you haven't seen it, definitely give it a look. State of Mind, it's called. So then he talked about how Confucian North Korea is, that there have been economic changes. He argues that the economy is much further developed than perhaps some Western commentators give credit for. He talks about people when they travel to North Korea, and some of his slides show like lots of Western products make their way in, and candy bar wrappers, that it's far more integrated into the world economy than perhaps some people would believe. And then talked about the fact that this is just part of the new Cold War, and the fact with the rise of the re-emergence of Russia as a major power, that the situation there. Now, some of the teachers didn't like it. There were comments at the end and a lot of questions about his presentation. People didn't particularly buy his argument. Some did, some didn't. But he showed some of these different headlines about how North Korea is constantly shown. The YouTube videos of, I don't know if you've seen any of those, but like some of these are really interesting, of very young North Korean musicians playing, like the Take On Me by a-ha. You can find a lot of those. This is kind of typical. So basically, his argument was that North Korea is far more stable than some would argue, that Korea is not as isolated or as out of the norm as some people would argue. And again, that was his argument. You can read some of his things, take a look, and I can send you the PowerPoint to see if you buy that or not. I had a student, I have a student from Singapore who travels an incredible amount. Because he has a passport for Singapore, he can go anywhere. So 2 summers ago, he went to North Korea by himself. He was a sophomore. And so he came back and gave a presentation to my class, and I talked to him a lot about it. And many of the things that you had talked about the phones, he reported back. But he flew from Singapore to Beijing, and then 2 North Korean handlers met him in Beijing, flew with him to Beijing, from Beijing to the capital in North Korea, and then he was never left alone, ever. On the tours, they would immediately delete his pictures. So if he took pictures of something they didn't like, they'd take his camera and delete it right away. He wasn't allowed really to interact with any people, you know, out in the streets and so on. It was very, very, he was tightly handled. He said he never felt in danger. It was very, very safe. The people that he did deal with were very polished, excellent English speakers, had answers for everything. This kid is bright enough and has been around enough that he could tell when things were being enhanced. The hotels were really nice. There were like 2 or 3 hotels in the capital for foreigners. At night, he was not allowed to leave. So they had like casinos and bars and all kinds of karaoke places in the hotels to entertain the foreign tourists. He holds both an American and a Singapore passport, and he used that to go to North Korea. So it was really fascinating. He went to the DMZ from the other side, which was interesting. So he saw, went to the DMZ from the North Korea side, and he noticed that, of course, the South Korean soldiers were watching the North Korean soldiers, but then there were North Korean soldiers watching the other North Korean soldiers. So in case they got an idea. So there are always North Korean soldiers watching the other North Korean soldiers. So this summer, I can't wait to talk to this kid because he went to Iran. So it should be really interesting. I guess his parents are very trusting. I don't know. So anyway, that was a big part of the discussion on North Korea, and an argument made by an academic that our approach, the American approach to North Korea, we should use both the stick and the carrot. And basically, his argument was been status quo for a long time, just like what's going on with Iran and the current deal. The argument being that yes, what's the goal, and has the goal been met? And of course it's a tough one. So anyway, that was about North Korea. All right. So, of course, food was a big part of the experience. And one of the things that we did is we went to a lot of really good Korean restaurants. And so Daniel Lee is one of the other sponsors of the trip. And so he gave us a lot of lessons about, what to eat, how you behave, table presentation, different kinds of foods. One teacher talked about doing lessons with comparing chopsticks. You could do for maybe elementary or middle school. You could come up, and I'm sure they're out there, different lessons on bowls and chopsticks and how they're used throughout Asia. So then it went through the different side dishes and so on, and it talked a lot about kimchi, of course, and so on, the preparation. So it was really interesting. And virtually every meal we would eat at a different Korean restaurant and tried lots of different foods. So if you like to eat, and I like to eat, it's a big part. And then we had a talk about actually the health benefits of the Korean diet, how overall it's very healthy, and the health benefits of kimchi, and so on. So food was a big part of the experience, and that's not surprising. All right. The other sponsor, the other founder of this is Helly Lee, and her experience is very interesting. How many people have read Still Life with Rice? Okay, it's a really, really good book. Helly has had 2 books out about her experience. You can go on YouTube, and she was on Oprah, so you can see her interview with Oprah. That was several years ago. It's really interesting. Her story has a lot to do with model minorities, actually, I think. I've listened to her speak about her experience 3 times, and every time I'm like, wow. And I'm pretty stoic about things, mostly. I was like almost bawling every time. She grew up in California and attended a high school where her goal was to be a Jewish American princess. So she did the cheerleader thing. She did the Southern California lifestyle thing. And she basically ran away from her Korean heritage. She did everything she could to make her eyes, she didn't have surgery, but she did everything possible to make her eyes rounder. She tanned. She would spend so much time in the sun that she became like a Korean Barbie. And she's very open and honest about this rebellious phase in her life and how she basically rejected her heritage. Then over time, she starts to listen, finally, to her grandmother, and her grandmother starts telling stories about her family's history and heritage. And she starts listening and learning, and she takes a trip back to Korea. She basically sells all her possessions and flies to Korea and just immerses herself, and she's met by all kinds of relatives and so on. And she lives in Korea for a while and starts to do research where she learns that some of her family is still in North Korea. And so parts of both of the books really are about her experience in organizing and helping to rescue some of her North Korean relatives. I know a lot of teachers at the high school level in Asian literature use parts of still life. It's a very good story about identity and growing up Korean American, and then once she embraces her heritage, it's really a sea change. Anybody else who's read the book want to comment on that? Talk about it at all? No, go ahead. Go ahead. Tell us a little about it. And Helly is, as you could probably tell from the video, she's very, very passionate about what she does, and she's very outgoing, very friendly. The whole week you're treated really well. She values educators. She told a story, she has children, and she had an experience where the first day of school, her daughter walked into the classroom, and one of the other kids told her that this classroom was for Americans. And that's another thing that really made Helly passionate about educating Americans about Korea and so on. She was really shocked that in this day and age, I mean, as a young kid, but basically when her daughter walked in and said, sorry, this is for Americans. So that was quite an interesting little story. All right, last thing I want to do, how many people know about Sijo? All right, one? Okay, come on. Yeah, I thought so. All right, so the three things that I think I took away the most were some interesting history lectures, some really good food, and then we wrote some Sijo. And I apologize for this sticker. I know it's political, but like I said, a bunch of my stuff got ruined, and so I put stickers on the modern stuff. But this is some of the Sijo from this time. So one of the professors gave us a Sijo lesson and basically talked about how every kid in the United States who goes to school learns haiku. And I know I did. I grew up in Iowa in a little small town, and we did haiku. But that very few people do Sijo. And so he taught us a lesson on Sijo. So I'll read you his favorite one. Though I die and die again, though I die 100 deaths, after my bones have turned to dust, whether my soul exists or not, my red heart, forever loyal to my Lord, will never fade away. So that's like one of the classic Sijos. So what is that about? What Korean values do you hear in that? Loyalty. Yes. Basically saying it's highly Confucian. It's basically saying that this soldier, it's obviously a soldier, will, no matter what, stay loyal to his Lord. And the professor told us the background to the story. And it's basically there was a rebellion going on. And this guy was kind of like Robert E. Lee, maybe in the United States, where he was torn between two paths. One would be to follow the rebellion, and apparently he agreed with a lot of the beliefs of the rebellion and a lot of the cause, but stuck to his Lord, even though he knew it was wrong. Lee obviously made the choice for states' rights or whatever, or for his state, slavery maybe. But the fact that this guy, even though he very much stayed with the cause, agreed with the cause, and he knew that if he stayed loyal, he would be executed. So he knew he was going to die, and he eventually was executed. So the way Sijos work is, haiku has 3 lines, right? The introduction, something develops, and then a surprise or a twist. Sijo, the patterns are a little different. So one of the common patterns, and you can sing it to Silent Night. You know Silent Night? That's the pattern that you use. So another one would be, Everest is the tallest of mountains, yet it is under the heavens. If one climbs and climbs and tries, there's no reason one can't reach the top. Yet some say they cannot make the climb. The mountain is just too high. So basically what you do is you tend to want to have some kind of surprise at the end in Sijo. So what I thought we could do is you guys could try to write a Sijo and see what you come up with. So why don't you give it a shot? Again, this is the pattern that's usually followed. It doesn't have to rhyme, but at the end it should be something that kind of surprises. All right? No? Come on! That's the beat. Yes, the syllables. That's the syllables. So, like, as I said, you could, though I die and die again, though I die 100 deaths, after my bones have turned to dust, whether my soul exists or not, my red heart, forever loyal to my Lord, will never fade away. Bad singing, but does that make sense now?
In English.
Okay, so think of Silent Night and then just try to write some words that will fit that beat, right?
Themes are open.
Themes are open. Anything you want. Okay, maybe this will help. First line introduces a topic. Second line develops the topic. The third resolves the issue, often with a surprise or twist. In a structure, this is another. It doesn't have to be. It can be any of these cadences. Mm-hmm. This one? Yep. This is another way to understand the meter. That helps. So that's the meter. So that's a 9. This is my children. Go back. Okay. All right. Which one would you like? Horror. Got it. I wanted to pass this around too. The history folks basically said if there's, and this is a new edition, updated, if there's one book you want to read, and this is academic, but about Korea, Bruce Cummings' book, Korea's Place in the Sun, is the place to go if you want the modern history of Korea. You want? Okay, you want to read it? Okay. Okay. Yes. Oops. All right, good, good, yes. Anybody else want to give a shot? Yeah.
So I kind of, because I came in, when, I just sort of wrote mine to the wound above silent that,
Okay.
and it's about kimchi.
Okay.
Kimchi is good. Kimchi is great. Buy it by the jar or crate. Chili, anchovy, salt, and cabbage. Hot or sour, your palate will gauge. Eat it with every meal. Kimchi, your soul will steal.
Excellent. Anybody else? All right, so anyway, I know for my class, I'm going to have the kids do some Suzhou for sure. You ready? All right, let's hear it.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear the brusque reports of Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un is a blowhard too. What we need is American reason. Donald Trump, it is your season.
Good one, good one. Thank you. All right, so anyway, again, the purpose for me up here was supposed to be to basically be a commercial for the experience in LA. And I highly recommend it. If you can get there, you should, and obviously by being here, you're very interested in Korea. It's a good experience. And again, it can be K-12 educators, librarians, there are art teachers, administrators, curriculum directors, college professors. It's a real mix of different kinds of people. Some come in knowing zero about Korea, and some come in knowing a lot and are near experts. And of course, it attracts lots of Korean Americans as well. So if you go, you'll get some good lectures on history. It gives you a good overview. They try to argue why Korea is important and why Korea deserves a bigger place in American curriculum. You'll get a lot of really good food. They feed you really, really well. And I mean, if you like Korean food, you'll be very, very happy. There's a lot of really good restaurants in Koreatown. You can roam around Koreatown in LA and shop. You can do the LA bit if you want. It's a nice hotel they put you in. It's very comfortable. You do have a roommate. You can go solo if you want, but then you pay the difference in that. And then you'll come away. The thing with having lots of different kinds of teachers is I can't say I brought back like one lesson plan that I will use. You create your own, but you'll get exposed to lots of different things. The art, because the elementary people and the art people and the music people do very different things than history teachers do, and in different levels. So if you're looking for a lot of pre-prepared lessons, that's not what you're going to find there, but you'll find there really, really good experience. And there are resources that you get access to in the Dropbox. There's all the lesson plans from the different years. So it's very worthwhile. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah. The program has evolved over time. I went 5 years ago, and at that time there was just CAFE, and they did not have the association with USC. And the program took place at the Korea Cultural Center in Koreatown, and it was really good. They kept a lot of the speakers, but the USC component helps a lot because the classes are held on campus at USC. and it's a beautiful campus. It's a gorgeous place. The weather's great. And they brought in more USC professors. And so I think the biggest difference that I saw was that having USC as a co-sponsor was really important and really made it, they've taken it up a step. Both Daniel Lee and Kelly Lee are very outgoing, warm people. They make you feel really at home, and any requests that you have, they'll try and meet, and they're good people, and it was a good experience. You want to say anything since you?
Oh, I would like to say, crazy fun. You should go. It's amazing. Whatever he says, all correct.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I know this is kind of a mishmash, but I wanted to give you little snippets of what we did and show you some of the PowerPoints in case you want me to send them to you, tell you about some of the resource. I know this was kind of like patched together, but there was so much to say, and I wanted to give you at least the general idea of what goes on there. So, hope some of you will attend. Yeah.
Well, this, as being a K-12 teacher too, I feel a lot of times that, like, I teach more American history than I do world history.
Yep.
So, and I feel like world history, especially in an alternative ed situation where I feel like my pacing is always, I'm always rushing against my pacing guide, and I never get as far as I want to get. And I am discouraged about how little I really know about Korea and different parts of the world that I feel like I should really know as a teacher. But how do you find that time to get in what you should get in? And do you have any words of advice or any encouragement to share with for social studies teachers that I want about 12 more hours from the
Yeah.
and do some of this stuff? And I know with core curriculum and stuff, it's just
Yes.
how do you do it? How do you teach? So I hardly ever get to Vietnam.
Of course.
It's
Yes.
frustrating.
And totally understand. Like, I think I started off by saying in AP world, Korea just gets a few minutes in the whole year.
And those are kids
That's-
that are actually interested in wanting to
Yeah,
learn about
but I mean, we in the AP, they take that test, and then they have to get good scores, or I hear about it. So, I'm going to do CJO in AP World. I don't care how I have to do it. Well, I think what they'll tell you is, first, just find any way you can make the correlation at all, just to give Korea a mention. They know that there's not time to do everything and that you're up against it, but they'll try and help you find ways to insert Korea into your curriculum wherever you can. But I totally know what and I did find it is hard, but you have to be patient because the elementary teachers and the middle school teachers, the art teachers and the dance teachers and the librarians, they all have different needs than the history folk who are teaching actual history. And so we spent a lot of time brainstorming ideas of how to use it, and most of it was of no use to me. But it was interesting. But I won't use it. I liked the part where the argument was made about that I started with how Korea actually is more important than people think. That it's a big country, the economy is huge, it's overshadowed by China and Japan and India, and therefore it doesn't get the coverage it deserves. And if you put it in Europe, it's a powerhouse. I really like that, and I think that's a good argument maybe to convince the kids maybe you need to pay attention to Korea more. Now at our school we have Korean kids in the class, so that I don't have to I don't have to convince them. They'll speak. Yeah.